Let's sit nice and tall and close the eyes. And just take this moment to allow yourself to arrive. Allow yourself to land softly in the space that you occupy. Allow your physical body to ground down, surrender to gravity, be connected to the earth beneath you. But in the same moment, allow the fire within to be ignited and allow the soul of the self to rise up into truth, into a greater reality, into unity, oneness. And with the next breath, embrace the water, the fluidity, the adaptability. As Swami Shivananda was so famously known for saying, in every moment, adjust, adapt, accommodate, like water. With each breath, sense the air element. And the air carrying with it everything that we need in this moment. The nutrients, the oxygen, the aliveness, the prana. Each breath in is a nourishment. Each breath out is a sharing. After all, our exhalation is the inhale of the trees, and the exhale of the trees is our inhalation. Everything is so interdependent and connected. And then finally, as you sit here connecting with all levels of yourself, be aware of something beyond the aspect of space, eternality. It is dimensionless. It has no qualities. Its vastness is beyond vast, just as the nature of your soul is beyond the containment of this body and life. It just goes on and on and on. Be grateful for the eternal nature of yourself. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. Breathing in for Om. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanu Tibsida Sadanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Yajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Ghritachi Shagman Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevyay Namaha. Gently release the hands down and flutter the eyes open. So typically the wisdom circle talks are a flow of consciousness. It's whatever it feels like is needed in the day. And sometimes there's a text that goes along with it, and sometimes there isn't. And today is the flow of consciousness also. We'll see where the conversation takes us. But just before class, I thought Bhakti Sutras of Narada. If I had a favorite scripture, which they really are all my favorite scriptures, but there's a special place in my heart for the Narada Bhakti Sutras. There are so many scriptures in this tradition, literally probably thousands of them, and so many commentaries. And each one of them has a particular focus, a particular way of presenting the teachings. Some of them are very technical. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is very technical, extremely technical. Do this, do this, do this, don't do that. The Bhagavad Gita is very emotional. It's definitely emotional. But it is also technical because it is a manual. You know, there are things laid out in there that are process-based, right? The Devi Mahatmya, again, very emotional, very emotional. And the Bhagavad Gita and the Devi Mahatmya are emotional. They're emotionalized Leela stories. So in the Bhagavad Gita, you're learning about Krishna and Arjuna and the conversation that they had on the battlefield. In the Devi Mahatmya, you're learning about the Devi's battles and how she saved humanity from the egoic demons. The Bhakti Sutras of Narada are very emotional also. But they're different. Because whereas the Bhagavad Gita is about Krishna and Arjuna first and you second, the Devi Mahatmya is about the Divine Mother first and you second, the Narada Bhakti Sutras are about you. They're about you and your emotionality. They're about what this practice brings to you. And so in that regard, I'd like to read the first several verses, which are just stunning. We start with verse number 1. Atato bhaktim vyakya syamaha. Now, therefore, we shall explain devotion to divinity. Every scripture, for the most part, or at least the sutra-based scriptures, the first sutra starts with atta, yoga. Atta, now. And the Yoga Sutras, I had two thoughts at the same moment. In the Yoga Sutras is atta yoga anushasanam. So now is the time for yoga. Here, now is the time for devotion. And everything that devotion entails. And so right there we know that this book is about me. It's about you. It's about what devotion can be for us. The second sutra, once I get to it, is Sva Tasmin Parama Prema Rupa. Bhakti, which is devotion, has been described as supreme love for that, for God, for Goddess. Bhakti is the personal experience of extreme love. Not human love. Human love is way too flawed, right? Human love is possessiveness, it's ownership, it's pride, it's proof, it's passion, it's lust, it's friendship. There's a lot of ways that we can define human love, the way that we love each other. And in every single one of those definitions, there's something unhealthy as well as something healthy. So when love for us becomes passion, certainly that feels wonderful, but it's also depleting. And it very easily turns to possessiveness or possession. Because if you feel passion for another person, you don't want to be sharing that passion with other people. So they better only give that passion back to you. So there's always something in human love that's limited and limiting. It's not a bad thing. It's just that it's limited. It's only limited to the point that our imagination can take it. And our imagination can only work with what it knows. And if our experience in this life has been betrayal, jealousy, or abuse, or way too much freedom, then that's what that passion will dictate to us. That's what it will contain, because that's what our imagination, that's the parameters of our imagination. There are a few people who have existed over time who can take their imagination beyond what their human experience has been. But that's the exception, not the rule. For most of us, imagination is contained within our experience, whether it's direct experience or what we've read in a novel, or what we've been taught by our teachers and by our parents and the like. Divine love, bhakti, starts off as a human love. It starts off as, Ma, I love you. Now what are you going to do for me? If I pray, what will I get for it? If I show you devotion, will you provide something back to me in return for that? So even in the beginning of our bhakti, the love that we express is very limited by our capacity to love in a human way. But if we allow ourselves to surrender, if we allow ourselves to walk the path of bhakti, to chant the path of bhakti, to feel the path of bhakti, then pretty soon, it doesn't really matter if she ever gives me anything. It's just such a joy to give to her. It's such a joy to place the flowers at her feet, to chant her name. That in and of itself is enough. And that is divine love. That in and of itself is enough. And we can extrapolate that out to everything. Initially, when we walk through life, everything is conditional. Every single thing is conditional. I'll work hard if I get the accolade. I'll go to school if I get the degree. I'll work the job if I get the paycheck. Everything is dependent upon something else. But when you walk the path of bhakti, and you begin to embody that path, and you begin to surrender to that higher, more divine love, it has nothing to do with what you get. It's everything is an offering. Everything is an offering. Now, some people will hear that, and they might automatically think, well, then that means that I have to tolerate everything in this life because everything is an offering. Then my toleration must be an offering too, right? It's like, no. Don't confuse the ego's confusion with divine love. Because tolerance of things that are hurtful and harmful, that is not love. That's self-inflicted pain, which will eventually become resentment. Because those expectations and conditions are still there. They're just hidden under the surface. If we're going to tolerate something for the Divine Mother, for the Divine Father, and call it devotion, then it needs to come from a place of 100% absolute surrender and love and selflessness. But it's very difficult for us to be selfless with each other, isn't it? Could you be selfless with your husband? 100%, absolutely?
99.
Right? There's always that 1%, isn't there? Isn't there? Could you be 100% selfless with your beloved? And the answer is, because you are a human, no, you cannot. You cannot. So therefore, and I don't know, maybe the Divine Mother knew this, when she brought forward all of her children. Maybe she recognized that there was going to be a dilemma for each and every one of us. The very same dilemma that Arjuna met with at the battlefield. It's like, how do I love completely without losing that deeper connection to myself without fear of alienation, without fear of repercussion, without concern for the outcome. How do I love so completely and not worry about the outcome? And what he found in the Bhagavad Gita was that it's hard. It's hard. And there are some people that I've spoken with who are scholars in the Bhagavad Gita, and they have said at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, there could be an argument made that he still doesn't figure it out. Because the last thing that he says to Krishna is, may your will be done. And the whole time Krishna is saying it's not about Krishna's will, it's about Arjuna's will. It's about Arjuna's heart. It's about Arjuna knowing the difference between the ego and the heart and acting in accordance with the heart. And yet here he gave it over and said, whatever your will is what I'll do, Krishna. So that argument, other scholars will say, no, that's not what that meant. But it was an interesting conversation that I was having with these individuals. Just understanding that there's so many different ways to look at things. So for us, if we're dealing with a difficult person, if we're dealing with a difficult situation, the Divine Mother gave us the power of free will. She gave us the power to stay or to go. She gave us the power to decide for ourselves how to best learn about selfless love. And sometimes the selflessness of the love is in the letting go. The selflessness of the love is in the setting it free. The selflessness of the love is in the faith that maybe I'm forcing this. Trying to anyway. Maybe I'm trying to make this be what I think it needs to be, what I think it should be. And maybe that's not it at all. Maybe it's meant to be something completely different, and it can't become what it's meant to be as long as I'm holding on to it. Now, that kind of a statement makes me well up a little bit. Because my husband, when he died, he was very peaceful that night. He was in his recliner. It was really the only place that he could be comfortable. And I was in a chair sitting next to him, and I had my head on his shoulder. And the alarm went off at 4 a.m. because it was time for his meds. And he was just sleeping so soundly that I decided I'm going to give him another hour before I disturb him. I'm just going to let him be. And so I reset the alarm for 5 minutes after 5. And I was just so grateful for the peacefulness that he was feeling in that moment, that he was fine. He was breathing. He was at ease. From 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, I woke up at 5 a.m., 5 minutes before the alarm went off, and he was no longer there. The first thing that came to my mind was things now need to be done. You go into that mode. Things now need to be done. I need to get on the phone. I need to let Casey know. I need to let Jay know. I need to contact hospice. I need to do all this. And so I went into the mode of doing and doing and doing. And then when they came with the hearse and they walked in with the gurney, there was that panic moment there. Before that, I was helping the hospice nurse, and I was doing what I needed to do, and I was fulfilling my responsibilities. And my daughter was there. I was taking care of her and not paying much attention really to what I was feeling. They came and they took him out, and as they were taking him out, I had to leave the room because that was the end of that. That was the end of my ability to hold it together. And so I walked outside and I fell down to the ground and I cried. And as I cried, the only thing that I could think was, I know I have to let you go. I don't have a choice in the matter, and neither do you. So go. Be free. Be free of what held you here. Be free of the pain that you felt while you were here. Go be free. And I sat there on the ground for a few moments, And I took a couple of breaths. They weren't pretty breaths. They were pretty, I don't want to breathe. Yes, I do want to breathe kind of breaths. But that realization, and I mean, like, that's an extreme example, right? That's like, I think that somewhere we all know you can't stop death when death comes. You can't stop. But we don't think that. We think this can change. This can have a different outcome. But it can't have a different outcome because it's not any other outcome meant to be. And when we accept that, it doesn't mean that there isn't pain and sorrow and suffering and grief, but it's different somehow. It's different. It's purposeful. It's purposeful versus the forcefulness of what is not purposeful. And so when we're in bhakti, we're with the purposefulness of the moment, the purposefulness of the love, the purposefulness of the freedom to allow that love to be without the attachment to the outcome. Does that make sense? Bhakti, the love of it, is so tremendous that it will heal everything. Verse number 3 says, Amrita Swarupa Cha. This devotion is also of the nature of immortality. It's our human nature, our human containment, the embodiment of this life that leads us to limit everything. Because we feel limited. Like I was born on a date and I'll die on a date and there'll be certain things that happen in between those dates, and that's my idea of life. That's pretty much everybody's idea of life, right? But bhakti, it opens us up to another idea of life. And that is that this is only one stage in it. And that it goes on. It's immortal. It never ends. I guess the one requirement there is that an individual would need to adhere to some concept of the soul continuing on after the body ends, and possibly reincarnation also. And then there's just the little details of reincarnation, like, do I come back exactly like this? Do I come back in some other form? Can I come back as an ant or a cockroach or a bird flying through the sky or a tree? There's those details, which don't really matter to us much in this moment, other than one thing, and that is the quality of the life that we lead now determines the quality of the next embodiment. And that's what these teachings tell us, that if I lead my life this time around in a way that is aligned with the ethics, aligned with the scriptures, not the human interpretation of the scriptures, but the pure words of divinity, the pure vibration of divinity, which is nothing other than love, then the next time around, you have the good fortune of being born into a household of yogis so that you can continue the work that you started in this life and every life before, right? So there's that. There's that immortality of the soul. It goes on and on and on. And that might sound a bit like dredging, like it goes on and on and on. But when you think about it, my husband told me one time, so I wanted to go back to school. I'm just a perpetual student. I love to learn. And I will, if I'm interested in a topic, I will learn everything that there is to know about a topic. But it also means I get bored easily. Because once you learn something, then you know it, So you have to keep learning something new. So I would continually go back to school. And he said to me one time, "You're going to be a student for your whole life, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, I sure hope so. Absolutely." So the time came and I decided I wanted to go to graduate school. But I was a little bit on the fence about what I should go and do. And I loved primatology. I had an affinity toward archaeology. I had loved forensic archaeology. Yeah, oh boy. And so he looked at me, and with a very blank stare, he just said, just do anthropology. You can go anywhere you want to go. You'll never get bored because it covers everything. And I thought, oh, that's genius. So I did. So we live so many lives. Why? Because there's so many experiences to have. There's so much to learn and to forget and to relearn and to forget again. There's so much that you can't cover it in a single life. So we keep coming back so that we can continue to acquire the fullness of the truth a little bit at a time, one experience at a time, one revelation at a time, one epiphany at a time. And then eventually, we have it all. We come into what we call remembrance, the remembrance of the soul, the remembrance of the self. And that remembrance is nothing other than abiding in the truth, which is bhakti, which is divine love. And then we're a saint, like Ammaji, or one of these other great souls that have decided, rather than float around in the ethers, they'll come back down in a body for the sake of us, just so that they can inspire us, just so that they can be present to what's happening in this human-made world, and maybe shed a little bit of light in the darker moments. Verse number 4, Yalabdva pumam sidho bhavati, amrito bhavati, tripto bhavati. This verse is one of my favorite verses in this scripture. The first time that I read it, I thought, oh, how just poetic it sounds, even in Sanskrit, even if you don't know what it means. Siddho bhavati, amrito bhavati, tripto bhavati. Bhava, bhava, bhava. Bhava is the quality or the intention that a person brings forward in a moment, whether knowingly or not. And here it translates as by attaining which. So by attaining which is bhakti. By attaining bhakti, by attaining divine love, the devotee's objects are fulfilled, and that person becomes immortal, full of passion, always and forever satisfied, forever joyful, completely full. That's the bhav that they bring forward. Bhavati, bhavati, bhavati. The quality that they bring forward is perpetual joy, perpetual love, perpetual non-attachment, perpetual peace. Perpetual. To me, that's the promise. That's the promise. And it's the fourth verse. The fourth verse in this beautiful scripture is all about you and me and what this path can mean to us. Those realizations and truths are in every other scripture also, but they're typically in a framework. See, for Arjuna, it's all about Arjuna's dilemma, which we then personalize. In the Devi Mahatmya, it's the Devi's battle for the salvation of humanity against these egoic demons. And then we personalize that. We anthropomorphize it. We bring it into ourself, right? But here Narada is saying, when you come into bhakti, you will experience perpetual joy and peace. You. That's the promise of the path. It's beyond me. I pay attention to the world. I watch. I do. And some things I see are beautiful, and some things I see are not. And the thing that I could never understand since the moment that I stepped on this path so many years ago is how on earth anybody could demonize that. How on earth could anybody demonize the promise of perpetual peace and joy? After all, isn't that the promise of every tradition? No matter whether you call yourself a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, isn't that the promise of every single tradition? Is that if you come to know yourself in the light of divinity, that what you'll find is perpetual joy and peace? And yet in today's world, what do they say about yoga? They say yoga is Satan's work. They say yoga is bad. They say yoga is antithetical to God. When the realization is that yoga tells you exactly what you need to do, how you can cultivate the skills to be you. Not to pay homage to someone else necessarily. I mean, there's teacher-student relationships and whatnot. But ultimately, it's you. Yoga is the most self-empowering tradition that there is. Because it says, no one's going to come save you. No one's going to come save you. There's no priest or rabbi or pope or anybody who's going to come and fix you. You have to do the work of you. And in order to do that, you need to take absolute radical self-responsibility over you and make the hard choices. Am I going to be consumed by the human world, or will I simply be a witness and figure out where it is that I can support the healing? And whatever work it is that I do, am I able to do it as an offering, place it at her feet, or am I going to do that work in a way that expects accolade and payback? Now, there's nothing wrong with any answer there. The whole spectrum is available to us. For the longest time, we're going to have our feet in both places. For the longest time, we're going to have one foot in the world of expectation and attachment and a toe, the tip of a toe, in the water of divine detachment and love. Because it's scary. Like, we've all spent our whole life saying, love and be loved. Mm-hmm. Love and be loved. Give and expect thank you. We've all been indoctrinated into the world of human expectations. And that's not easy to change. But if you keep dipping your toe in the water of divine love, eventually you'll want to change it, because you'll start to recognize where the hypocrisies are, where the inconsistencies are, where we can love more profoundly, more purposefully, more completely. And there'll always be, for a long time, that little voice in the back of the mind that goes, but what about me? But ultimately, what you'll find is that the deeper you stick your toe into the water of divine love, the more you realize that me already has everything it needs. Already has all of it. Definitely when my husband passed, I went through grief, and it lasted for years, and it's still there, and it always will be. But the grief is not sadness that he left his body. It's gratitude that I had any time with him at all. It's not sorrow and disappointment over the way his life turned out. It's inspiration and gratitude for the way his life turned out. It's not wishing it had been different in spite of all the stories we told ourselves about how we were going to grow old together. It's not grief that never happened. I mean, certainly there is some, but it's not that. It's that we didn't wait to love each other. We didn't wait to care for each other. We didn't say, hey, in 2027, we're finally going to get to that place where we love each other. We said, no, it's now or it's not. And literally, we said that. It's now or it's not. And we chose now. And that was pretty much what our life was based on. Now. Not some imaginary day in the future. No matter how good your imagination is, you cannot make that day up. It'll only ever be something that we long after, that we keep pushing further and further into the future when conditions don't meet our expectations. It's now or it's not. Period. It's now or it's not. Does that make sense? Yeah. But that's hard to say. And it's even harder to abide by when we're in a place of being indoctrinated into thinking we're limited. We have to take what we get. We have to fight and force for what we want. Then that now or not is just too scary. Because it's full of what ifs. The ego goes, but what if, but what if, but what if, but what if? What if you're wrong? What if it's tomorrow? What if it's just one more week? And the soul says, you don't need one more week to love. You have the capacity to do it right now. You don't need one more week to set things free in your life, to let the relationships go that need to be let go of, to let people stand on their own 2 feet, to let yourself stand on your own 2 feet. You don't need a week from now. It's now, or it's not now. You don't need another week to think about it. You don't need another week to think about stopping smoking, stopping drinking, stopping doing drugs, stopping having irresponsible sex, stopping overspending, stopping gambling. You don't need another week to think about these things. You've already thought about them. From here till the cows come home, you don't need another week. It's now or it's not now. And it's really that simple. But we are indoctrinated into but I have to think about it some more. And I do it too. We all do it. We're human, But just understand that the more that you give in to I got to think about it, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year, then this perpetual joy will be even further away than that. Perpetual happiness will be even further away than that. And I'm not saying go end all your relationships. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's, in every relationship that we have in our human experience, there's something in that relationship that can change. There's some way that we can become and allow there to be a greater freedom of joy within the relationship. In my own relationship with my husband, it was his socks on the floor. His socks on the floor. Every time I saw his socks on the floor when they were dirty, I would pick them up and begrudgingly put them in the hamper and then proceed to tell him about it. And it really because it wasn't just the socks, it was the socks and the t-shirt and whatnot. He didn't use the laundry basket. So I would say to him, why don't you use the laundry basket? So I went out and I bought him a laundry basket. And he was like, oh, thank you for buying me a laundry basket. That was so nice of you. And I'd put it in the corner and I would say, now use the laundry basket. And the next day, guess where the socks were?
Next to the hamper.
Next to the hamper. And this goes on for a little while, And I'm in this mindset of, he's doing this to irritate me. He's doing this to make me angry. He's doing this and he knows I'm going to get angry. So I go to him and I said, why aren't you using the laundry basket I bought for you? And now you have to understand my husband was an engineer. So that says enough right there. And he says very solemnly, well, if I'm going to be honest, you bought the laundry basket. And if I was going to buy myself a laundry basket, that wouldn't be the one I would buy. And I looked at him and I said, get in the car. And we went off to like IKEA or something. I said, we're not going home until you find your laundry basket. So he finds this thing that's like, it's like 3 compartments. He's got to put all these pieces together. He's got delusions of grandeur about how he's going to separate out all of his things, and comes home, puts it together, puts it in the corner. Guess where his socks were the next morning? On the floor, next to the laundry basket. And I just like sat there feeling hopeless, like, I bought you a laundry basket. I let you buy yourself a laundry basket. I decided I was just going to stuff it for a while, see if things changed. Nothing changed. A couple months later, I walk in and I'm just in a mood. It was a day. And his stuff is on the floor. And I turned around to him and I said, like, what the heck? Am I always going to have to live like this? Like, why can't you do this one thing? Right? And we do that, don't we? We all get into this, why can't you do this one thing? But the reality is that we're always asking people for 10,000 things, not just one thing. And he, again, just sat there and he said, well, I'm going to be really honest about it. I know that you want me to use a laundry basket, but I don't really care about the laundry basket. I don't really care about the laundry basket. And I said, fine. Then I'll just leave your laundry there, and when you're ready to pick it up and do your laundry, you will. And that took work on my part. And it took work on his too, because I really did leave it there. I let him pick it up. I let him take charge of his own laundry. And what we did then instead, because in that process, I realized why I had such a fixation on that, had to do with my own life, my own childhood, my own sense of how do I feel safe in a cluttered place when clutter represents to me danger. It represents to me a memory from my childhood. So we changed our sides of the bed. He got the inside part of the room, and I got the part when you walk in the door. So my part was always nice and tidy, and I didn't care what his part looked like because I didn't have to look at it because it was on the other side of the bed. And he was able to keep his clothes the way he wanted to, and we were able to come to a happy medium there. But the two big things were, and they were both epiphanies on my part. He must have had his own too, but I don't know what they were. But on my part, the first epiphany was that he doesn't have to see things the way I see things. Just because I want there to be some kind of clean, some kind of orderliness to some things, doesn't mean that he's going to see it the same way, and it doesn't mean he has to. And number 2, for every expectation that I have about how my environment should be, it comes from something else. Yeah, it comes from something else. And if I want to find happiness or peace in this moment, I need to know what it comes from so that I can reconcile that for myself. Since then, I've come to the understanding, of course, over the years, that just because a space is slightly messy doesn't mean that it's dangerous. Doesn't mean it has to represent that. It can just represent a well-lived-in space.
I love that.
A space where love is. A space where comfort is. So does that make sense? Yeah. And when we are willing to investigate life like that, when we're willing to, have the down and dirty conversations, why don't you pick up your socks? But understand that no matter what the socks represent to you, that it also represents something else that you're holding inside of yourself that is not reconciled. And it's only through reconciliation of self with self that we come to that perpetual joy more and more, that perpetual love more and more. If there's no reconciliation within our own self, then that joy is always going to be even further away, seemingly. Yeah. Number 5 goes on to say, Yat prapya na kinchid vanchati na sochati na dveshti na ramate na sohi bhavati. After obtaining that devotion, that bhakti, the devotee does not desire anything else, does not grieve, does not hate, does not enjoy anything else, and does not feel encouraged to do anything else. Somebody might listen to that and say, I understand not hating. I understand, maybe not grieving. What do you mean not enjoying? Well, the human concept of enjoyment is different than divine enjoyment. The human concept of enjoyment is, I just had the best chocolate bar I've ever had. Where do I get another one? Because this spaghetti doesn't look very good right now in comparison. Or this whatever else is on the plate doesn't look as good in comparison. Everything in our human experience is comparative. We compare the chocolate to the vanilla. We compare the ice cream to the cake. We compare the spinach to the broccoli. We compare the yes to the no. We compare the up to the down, the in to the out, the dark to the light. We compare. And in comparison, there is always preference. And in preference, there's always dissatisfaction. Because I want the warm, sunny weather, not the I need a blanket weather. I find lots of enjoyment in the warm, sunny weather. But in the blanket weather, it's like, I'm miserable because I'm cold. But what this is telling us is that if you give your heart to bhakti, if you give your heart to divine love, there's just as much enjoyment in the blanket as there is in the sunshine. There's just as much enjoyment in the spinach as the broccoli, in the in as the out, as the up as the down. There's just as much enjoyment, because enjoyment is not something that comes to you from outside of yourself. Enjoyment is the thing that you cultivate within yourself when you see purposefulness at every moment. When you see surrender in every moment. When you see divine will in every moment. And when you see the potential for divine love in every moment. So then you don't need. And that morning when I sat out on the ground, it was that. It was, I don't need for him to be here physically right now because I know he can't. But he's everywhere now. So he's always here. Always. So why do I need to put demands upon him that he cannot fulfill? And why do I need to put demands upon myself that I cannot fulfill? You don't. You stop doing that. And once you surrender that, it's not hopelessness. It's not giving up. That's not what it is. It's not giving up. Giving up is saying to yourself, well, I guess I failed at that, so now I'm going to try this. And Krishna is very clear with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita about that. Because Arjuna says to Krishna, better I go off and be a monk. Better I go off and live in a cave with the renunciates than do this battle. And Krishna looks at him and he goes, do you have no respect for your teachers? Do you have no sense of their accomplishment? That you should want to skirt your own responsibility to reconcile your own self by hiding out in robes? And Arjuna is like, that's not what I meant. And Krishna's like, no, but that's what your ego said. Your ego said, well, I'm just going to give up here and go do that. No, this is surrender. It's to say, where I am at right now in my life has such limitations because I only see up, down, in, out, dark, light. I only see the opposites which have brought forward great preferences within me. If I start to shed some of those preferences, then I can move myself over a little bit toward that bhakti truth, toward the truth of love, the truth of grace, the truth of unity. And in that, there is something waiting for me that is not to be acquired, because it's actually a birthright. It's what you're meant to discover in this life about yourself. It's what you're meant to discover in parts, in this life or the next life or in 10,000 lives, who knows. But it's a promise. It's not an escape. It's actually where you're eventually going to end up anyway. So this not desiring anything, because you understand there's nothing to desire. Divinity is everywhere and in everything. Would you all agree?
Yes.
Divinity is everything and in everything everywhere. No exceptions. So it doesn't matter if I have an iPhone 10 or an Android, right? It doesn't matter if I have a daisy or a rose with thorns. It doesn't matter if I have a house in Pennsylvania or a house in the Bahamas. Because God is everywhere and in everything. So to desire something as a human being means that I don't believe that. Because God is here as well as there. So I don't really need to go there. Now, because we're human beings, we're still going to desire to go there. We're going to desire to go to Machu Picchu. We're going to desire to go to the ashrams in India, the temples in India. We're going to desire. But they say that there are some places in the world where that energy of divinity is a bit more profound than in other places, more easy to identify with, more easy to experience, because there's less clutter, less chaos. And that's why we go there, is to remember what's here and what's everywhere, all at once. We don't go there to escape, but we go there to escape, right? You know anybody who has gone to Machu Picchu and then they're going off to this place and then they're going off to that place and then they're going to go over here because they're going to go find themselves? You're not going to find yourself there. You're going to find yourself here. The only reason why you go there is possibly, if all conditions align appropriately, is so that you can have a moment to breathe, so that you can remember that, oh, I actually don't need to come here because I can be anywhere and be exactly who I am in that divine meaning. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we don't need to desire because we see that it's already everything. And we don't need to grieve because we know that when one thing ends, it only begins again. Ed is no longer in the physical body, but he's still here. My mother, my brother, my grandmother, they're no longer in their physical bodies either, but they're still everywhere. And if you adhere to reincarnation, they'll be back. We'll see each other again someday. Totally. Just like we've all seen each other before, and we'll see each other again. It's inevitable because we keep traveling together and individually. We don't have to grieve. We still will because we're human. But we start to realize that the grief can be less the story of what I've lost and more the celebration of what I've actually experienced. And we don't have to enjoy, because to enjoy on the human level is to say this is better than that. Instead, we're given Ganesha's enjoyment, which is everything. It's everything. Enjoy all of it, even the difficult moments. Do a time check. Oh, it's perfect timing. Let's see what 6 says. Yat nyatva mata bhavati, stabdha bhavati, atmaramha bhavati. And there's that bhavati, bhavati, bhavati again. After knowing bhakti, the devotee becomes like an intoxicated person, free from all activities like an inert object, and finds all the joy in their own self. Capital S self. Those are the first 6 verses of the Narada Bhakti Sutras. And they tell you everything you need to know about why you should be or could be on this path. Why, if you are on this path, you should stay. And why, when people say negative things about this path, you should just let it go and not listen to that. Because ultimately, where this path brings you is home to yourself. Questions or reflections? Are we good? Yeah?
I was just thinking about you were relating the tale of your husband dying, and my brother-in-law just died. And my sister had a very similar experience, extremely similar. And they kept everything very simple. And I was so impressed with the fact that she called me, there was a burial, she called me after the burial, and she was laughing. And it was just so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's very much what you're talking about.
Absolutely. We need to have fewer funerals and more celebrations of life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you meet Ed?
Mm-hmm.
You did?
I did.
Were you at the celebration of life? Did you? He was a magnificent soul, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And you knew Ed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You and Ed. 2 peas in a pod in a lot of ways.
He's with me often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's constantly looking over my shoulder, and sometimes I'm not expecting it. And I'm like, okay. Stop sneaking up on me.
Do you miss those socks? Those socks, I bet you look at it differently now.
I look at it so differently. I totally do. Because, sure, as you know, the human heart says, I would give anything to have to pick up his socks again. You know? But I also hear him saying, no, you wouldn't. You know? Did you meet Ed?
I did.
You did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the socks, right, was his gift to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's what you said.
Absolutely.
That actually facilitated your looking inward to find out, why am I irritated by that?
100%.
And that, to me, that's almost what all of the sutras are saying, or what all the sutras are pointing to, is that in the midst of the human experience, we have the ability to find God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Ed would look at me and say, you're welcome. You know?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And of course he'd have that smirk on his face while he was doing it. Because, you know, there's lots of stories he could tell too about epiphanies that he had. And, you know, I mean, we were a challenge to each other, but we were a loving challenge to each other. And we both understood to some degree that the purposefulness of our relationship was the self-reconciliation that we each experienced, you know. And that can be hard because when we allow ourselves to move out of the way of another human being's self-reconciliation, the ego jumps forward and says, well, wait a minute, where do I fit in here? Like, your self-reconciliation has to have something to do with me, right? And so we're at time, but I'd like to share just one more short little story, if I might, with you. So after the chemotherapy stopped working, all through the time that Ed was living with cancer, he didn't just do chemotherapy. He also did acupuncture and homeopathy, and he sought naturopath and many other things. After the chemotherapy stopped working, he continued with those other modalities. And we had heard about a person who did some type of therapy, which I'm not thinking of the name of right now. But it had to do with, I guess, reading some aspect of energy within the body and doing not a past life regression, but an early life regression. So going back to childhood and looking at certain things as you're coming forward, reconciling those things so that you can be in a place of greater peace when the moment comes to pass. And it's very aligned with the teachings of yoga, because in yoga we say that last breath that you take, your mind be on God. If your mind is full of other stuff that you haven't reconciled from your life, then your mind can't be on God. So he's going through this process, and I'm sitting in most of the sessions with him, and it comes to a point where I'm going to say he hits a brick wall with this. And he's gone from being really kind of open to the experience of it to being very closed. And he's like, I think we're done here. And I looked at him and I said, honey, I don't think we're done here. And he goes, well, I feel like we're done here. And I said, well, why are you saying that? And he goes, because I think that, I've uncovered everything that I can uncover in this regard. And I looked at him and I said, the whole purpose of this, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the whole purpose of this journey is for you to reconcile the sorrows that you've had in this life to some degree. And I really feel like there's a sorrow that you are not addressing, and you won't even call it by its name. And I don't know its name, because it's not my sorrow. And he looked at me and he said, what are you talking about? And I said, before you came back to New Jersey, there was a young woman you were very much in love with. And your sister called you on the phone and said to you, you will not marry her. Come home now. And you were young and you were impressionable. And you told me one time only, about 24 years ago, that in that moment when you chose to walk away from that person, that your heart broke. And you never spoke about it again. And that has nothing to do with it. And I said, well, why don't you talk to the therapist about it and see if maybe that has something to do with this wall that you've come up against? So he said, only if you'll be there with me. And I said, well, I don't think that this is my story. I don't think that I don't want to be there if it's going to cause you to feel on edge or like you can't talk about it. And he said, no. He said, I think it's important. He said, you might have hit on something. So we go into the next session, and sure enough, he breaks down. He breaks down because he was carrying for his whole life the disappointment of what could have been. Now, it doesn't mean he didn't love me. We had an amazing relationship, and we loved each other very much. I had heartaches in my past, too. Things that I don't know what would have happened had something been different. But that was so pivotal for him. And yet, you know why it was so hard for him to face? Because he was afraid of what it would do to me. He was afraid of how it would impact our relationship. But I understood that our relationship didn't have anything much to do with that. That was something it did, but it didn't. He was carrying that forward with him in his life. And it was something that he had not reconciled, the disappointment, the grief, the sadness, And so I said to him, well, her name was Maria. I said, she was Mexican. She had a very big family. And he didn't have a very big family. So that was something that he found to be very special. And I said, well, if you know her whole name, reach out to her. Reach out to her. And he said, there's no purpose in doing that. And I said, you don't know that there's no purpose in doing that. You might reach out to her and find out that she actually went on to be very happy. You might find that she was able to reconcile what you were afraid you did to her by leaving. So it could be very healing. So as far as I know, he did not reach out. But he said that he had gotten enough of a reconciliation within his own self, just acknowledging, number one, that he had a lot of sorrow because he walked away from this relationship at the behest of somebody else and somebody else's prejudices in his family. And his sister was very important to him because she raised him. And that when he walked away, he hurt this person because he offered them no explanation. So he was in some way, shape, or form able to face that reality, even if he didn't take it any further than that. So the reason I tell you that is because for each and every one of us, that experience exists in our experience of this life. What have you left unresolved? Right? And where is it that you are not taking steps because you're afraid of what the other person's going to think in your life? Stop thinking that way. Or at least try. Because our entire purpose here is reconciliation. Not reconciliation of someone else's ego, but reconciliation of our own self with our own self. Yeah, completely. But compassionate redemption, not punishment of the self. Compassionate redemption. You know, Ed cried a lot of tears over that. We cried a lot of tears over it together because there was suffering there. And I'll bet you that if each and every one of us sat down and started journaling on our early life, we would find several similar situations to that we have still not shed tears over or felt grief about. I'll stop there. Let's sit tall. Close the eyes. In this breath and in this moment, make a vow to yourself that as you're able and as it is healthy and appropriate to do, that you'll begin the work of the reconciliation, of the redemption of the self, compassionately with the self, so that the bhakti can be so deep, so powerful, so healing, so that the love can become what it is meant to be eventually. Divine, whole, complete. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And together we'll lift our voices in one Om, taking the breath in. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere find peace, love, light, and happiness. May our words, our thoughts, and our actions have something to do with that. Om, peace, peace, peace.